Paul, really appreciate you connecting with our students today, both at UCLA Law as well as the UCLA Extension School for the Blockchain Technology Management Certificate Program. How's your Friday going?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. My Friday's actually going really, really well. It's never dull in crypto. It's never dull at Coinbase, and today is proving to be no exception. So I'm glad to have a chance to spend some time with you all as well.
You know, a lot of the people in the legal field that are trying to figure out the digital asset space look to you. You've had experience at Web 2, you're bridging over to Web 3 and providing a lot of the lessons to the newest iteration of the internet, a lot of us believe. Really, from your vantage point in navigating your own career, what has led you to the transition in intellectual property legislation, serving as the US magistrate judge, focusing on the legal challenges, which I think are the most intense right now facing cryptocurrency?
Well, Robert, I appreciate your acknowledging my time in Web 2. The reality is, I started my career at the dawn of Web 1. In fact, I started my academic career when I suppose it would be fair to say we were in Web 0 because Tim Berners-Lee hadn't even yet developed protocols for the World Wide Web. I've been very blessed throughout my career to have the chance to apply legal principles to some of the most interesting technologies of the day. And crypto has certainly been at the top of that list. But throughout my career, I've really had thought about my career and thought about transition largely in terms of where are the most hard, interesting problems in tech, where is the law most unsettled, and how can I play some small part in helping to bring clarity to that challenge. For me, the earliest example of that was as a young lawyer litigating the browser wars involving Microsoft and the Department of Justice and a number of private parties. Those really were the platform fights of the day, and that continued on, throughout my tenure on the bench. I had a front row seat to some pretty interesting fights between Apple and Samsung and the smartphone patent wars, and the debate between Oracle and Google over whether or not you could actually copyright or protect an API. And so just focusing on that intersection, focusing on where, there was the most opportunity to add some value to those discussions has served me well. And that continues to be true even to the present day.
You were early days, as we all know, at Coinbase in terms of building legal compliance, government relations. And a lot of people here are early days at whatever firm that they're partnering with as in-house counsel, as trying to build a blockchain business. What strategies have you employed to navigate the complex global regulatory landscape as you weave in people that are trying to figure out like everything evolving under them?
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, I try to remind myself that a little bit of humility can go a long way when you're sort of thrown into these situations. And as much experience, as much knowledge, and as much confidence as any of us might have that we're up to the challenge, I think it's always important to remember that these issues, whether it's the securities laws and blockchains, whether it's how to apply very complex sanctions regimes to financial systems that weren't even imagined at the time of the Bank Secrecy Act, and all sorts of examples like that. No matter what the situation, there's often, almost always, much more to learn than there is to teach. And so I try to bring that mentality to whatever new challenge I might have. And at the same time, I also try to bring a certain appreciation that, when lawyers are thrown into these situations, they are almost always brought in because they have something to offer, because they can bring a unique perspective from prior experiences with other areas of law or other technologies. And that gives me at least the minimum confidence to feel like I can work my way through the puzzle and come out the other side with some kind of an answer, and hopefully largely unscathed.
For people like myself and fellow instructors like Cinna, we're in an echo chamber of enthusiasm, and you're, having gone Web 1, 2, 3, able to provide like more of a skeptical lens, like let's see what the potential complications could be here and help executives navigate those. What do you see as the biggest legal challenge facing the crypto industry vis-a-vis securities laws, regulatory clarity, and putting the pieces together on those?
So it's interesting. I actually think that certain areas of the global legal regime as applied to crypto are relatively clear, and being executed relatively well. I mentioned, for example, the Bank Secrecy Act and all of the rules regarding anti-money laundering laws, what are referred to as KYC or Know Your Customer rules. I think we've done a pretty good job in crypto of adopting those frameworks to this technology and to the particulars of distributed ledger technology, especially in ways that are working. There's always room for improvement, but I think that area of the law and that regime is actually working reasonably well. I think the most obvious area where the law is frankly broken and those responsible for regulating the law, I think, are misguided is in the context of the securities laws. And Coinbase's disagreements with the Securities and Exchange Commission here in the United States are no secret. I'm not sure we could be more public and transparent about our fundamental view that many of the digital asset projects that are operating quite well fall outside of the scope of the federal securities laws as they've currently been drafted. And we've been willing to go to court and remain in court in order to uphold or vindicate those positions and really those principles. But I think for the United States as a whole, Robert, the real issue is, are we going to continue to dicker and squabble over what an investment contract means in the context of a digital asset or cryptocurrency? Are we going to continue to have turf battles between the SEC on the one hand and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission on the other, all while the rest of the world is not waiting? They are racing ahead to implement comprehensive rules and sensible trade-offs between investor protection on the one hand and promoting innovation on the other. And so I think having a global perspective on this helps drive some of the urgency that I feel, and I think many of us in this space feel, that we're wasting time and that we're putting at risk a very precious asset, which is our leadership in this area as a country. And if the United States doesn't wake up, we're going to suddenly realize that we've lost crypto and that we're at the same disadvantage as a result of our having lost semiconductors a generation or two ago, and so many other technologies that are now suddenly so critical to our national security and really our global leadership position.
Well, you mentioned the global leadership, and Coinbase really does have a worldwide footprint. As you mentioned, like the applicability of a lot of the distributed ledger technologies is everywhere. And you're in a unique position in that when something happens, the majority of the players are looking to see what Coinbase does. If there's a lawsuit, there's an avalanche of amicus briefs in support of Coinbase at every avenue. So how is navigating that essentially leadership position and being able to set the temperature relative to everyone that's trying to support you been different than just being like a company in an ecosystem that's working together towards a common good?
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge that Coinbase certainly didn't set out at any point in time to become the leader of a regulatory reform movement. At the end of the day, Brian Armstrong and Fred Arison, when they started this company more than a decade ago, just wanted to build super cool products that would make people's financial lives a little bit easier and a little bit fairer. And that remains our focus even up to the present day. But over time, I think it's fair to say we've come to appreciate that Coinbase does have, I think, a unique perspective and maybe even a unique responsibility to lead on some of these issues. We are, after all, not only the first major cryptocurrency firm to go public here in the United States, but really we remain, the largest, certainly publicly listed cryptocurrency firm anywhere in the world. And with that comes a certain, I think, opportunity really to help shape some of the debates over, the scope of the federal securities laws, what it means to implement some of FATF's guidance on the travel rule. I could list a dozen issues or more where someone has to pick up the mantle and help lead and move the industry forward. And at the same time, recognize that we're not doing this and we're not in this alone. That there are many other firms, indeed many other individual developers who care deeply about crypto, want to see this technology flourish, want to see sensible rules in place to keep the fraudsters and the scammers as far away from this as possible. but just it's going to require collective effort, and so we're just trying to do our part. But I never lose sight of the fact that we're doing this for much more than just our employees, our shareholders, and people tied directly to the company.
I remember in early days that the popular thing that many crypto enthusiasts were essentially resigning themselves to moving things offshore, but Brian was very adamant that this can be done onshore. Sin and I both know many people that have even moved over to Wyoming to support the efforts over there on a state-by-state basis. I would be curious to know, from a legal wrapper perspective, how do you see blockchain crypto impacting traditional legal frameworks?
Well, we have operated as a global firm almost since day one, and crypto is inherently global by nature. I think one of the things that I treasure the most about this community, and if I can use an almost too grand word, this movement, is that it's for everybody. It's for people sitting here in Palo Alto, California, at the center of Silicon Valley. It's for people who barely have a functioning phone and a weak internet connection halfway around the world. And so, we have always had a perspective that even though our largest market remains the United States, even though we were founded here in the U.S. and we're not going anywhere, we're going to continue to grow our company and our business here for as far as the eye can see. We need to think about, what are the implications of restrictions on crypto, wherever they may come from, on the ability of a 2-person developer team in Dubai or a 5-woman team looking to implement blockchains for carbon credits in Nigeria, or wherever the opportunity may lie. What are the implications of what we're doing on the next generation and the generation after that of entrepreneurs and developers? So, our perspective has always been really focused on how do we take existing legal principles and rules that have served us all reasonably well in all kinds of circumstances and across many generations of technology, and adapt them to this generation of technology, which very much includes blockchains and distributed ledger technologies. And one of the sort of core principles or core arguments we've urged in our fight with the SEC, Robert, has been, look, you don't have to throw out the entire baby with the bathwater when it comes to the federal securities laws. The fact of the matter is, Congress anticipated, yes, changes, evolutions, developments, but the SEC has always historically adapted existing rules for how you register as an issuer, or what types of conflict management practices exchanges and others have to follow to the technology and the markets of the day. We do this today, with respect to asset-backed securities. We do this with respect to oil and gas futures. I could list a long, ledger of examples of the SEC making accommodations and rules that respect the principles that underlie the current laws, but that recognize that, what a buyer of a pork belly futures securities contract may need is different than what someone interested in acquiring tokens for governance purposes or security purposes on a blockchain network might need in order to make a sound decision. So it's really just about holding to underlying principles, but adapting them to new technologies. And we think we can do this if we just sort of get out of this, zero-sum thinking that seems to pervade so many parts of the SEC, at least in the present day.
You've rattled off a lot of really compelling use cases. In emerging markets, where I'm seeing in some countries up to 50% are using crypto in some variety to get out of their native fiat or escape the inflation that I know Brian referenced. He would go to a restaurant when he was overseas, yes, and they're changing they have to change the menu because everything's moving so well.
Between the appetizer and dessert in some cases, right?
So, what use cases are you most excited about facing crypto these days? You mentioned a few.
Yeah, I mean, look, I actually personally am most excited about the original use case, which, if you go back to the white paper that Satoshi wrote, it was all about a new method of payments. And I still think that there are tremendous opportunities for efficiency gains and, frankly, just creative solutions to the access problem that plagues so much of our financial system by implementing, blockchain technologies into modern payment systems. So for me, that's still the most compelling situation because, the reality is that still too few people have access to basic financial services in this country and around the world. I think crypto can help solve that. And when I see remittance, for example, solutions shaving 80, 90, even 95% of the transaction costs of sending money home from a place like where I'm sitting right now in Palo Alto, California, to Mexico, to India, to Brazil, wherever. I get most excited about that. And then there are all the more cutting edge use cases in gaming, for example, that I think are quite exciting, in digitization of health records that offer such promise. So there's a lot to get excited about, but what's so fascinating to me, Robert, is we still haven't even scratched the surface of solving the original problem of payments, and I think crypto can really go a long way to changing that.
We're on fire for gaming here in LA, so we love to hear that.
Absolutely.
Do you see institutions of higher learning and research centers being like aggregators of showing policymakers what's happening with these use cases, or how could we be best of service as we see like all the incremental changes that are happening?
I think universities are critical laboratory for taking the best ideas from the digital asset or cryptocurrency community and showcasing them to a much wider, much more general audience. It's one of the reasons you and I were chatting even separately about my interest in speaking to as many students and faculty members and others at so many different universities all around the world. It's because I think in so many ways, for crypto and for digital assets to become more than just a plaything of a few hobbyists, and to really become an important fundamental technology for billions of people, we're going to have to basically move from a world where there's a special language associated with crypto. There's a particular handshake you have to know in order to be able to participate in DeFi, to where lots and lots of people from all walks of life just are using the technology and don't even know it. I think universities are going to be a critical way that we make that transition, because universities, after all, we're born really of the idea that great ideas need to be shared in order to reach their full potential. So I can't imagine this actually ever coming to pass unless we involve university life in this conversation. And that's one of the reasons I'm talking to you. It's one of the reasons I'm talking to so many others.
It all seems like fresh technology, but it's been 10 years since Sin and I've been in the industry. So a lot's changed, but not really much has changed. But I remember in early days, it was marked by a lot of firms working together because they know that adoption benefits everyone. And of course, Coinbase has really been a leader on that. Do you feel like the continued push for the space to continue to evolve is working together through industry groups, affinity organizations, and continuing with that trend?
Look, I think we've made a lot of progress over those 10 years at sort of the highest levels in coordinating our strategy and coordinating our work to promote crypto. The industry groups you mentioned, for example, I think are far more effective today than they were even just a few short years ago. And many of these industry groups tend to focus on political engagement. And I think if you look at just even in the last several months, any number of elections where pro-crypto candidates have had much more success than they ever did before, and those with a knee-jerk anti-crypto bent have suffered at the polls and in elections. I think all that speaks to that effectiveness. But I'm most excited, Robert, about all the ways in which the community is working together to help advance the technology and advance the opportunities. Crypto, again, by its nature, is a grassroots technology. It started with a handful of people online and offline just getting together to talk about how we could build these technologies in a way that didn't rely upon large centralized players, or certainly institutionalized financial organizations like banks and others, in order to connect human beings to one another for all kinds of purposes. So I do think that the coordination is getting better each and every day. But I think the most promising examples of that are actually at the grassroots level. It's in the meetups that are still taking place. It's in all the crypto projects that are coming online every day. It's that one or two developer team that decides that there's a better way to build the mousetrap. And so I'm going to take my ideas, put some code out there for people to take their shots at, and hopefully in the process, improve. that's where we're going to see the most progress. And I think that's happening. It's taking longer than any of us might like.
Many of those grassroots organizations have taken the form of a type of DAO, like a horizontal organization where collective beliefs are pushing things forward, and people feel more engaged than perhaps like a vertical. Like, do you see that continuing to be an organizational structure or providing the basis for a legal framework that continues to work on behalf of the industry?
Yeah, I'm very bullish on DAOs as an organizing principle. Frankly, not just for cryptocurrency or digital asset projects, but for social movements of all types. And the reason for that is that, at the end of the day, maybe I'm oversimplifying how DAOs can have that kind of effect, but what a DAO is really nothing more than a collection of individuals or entities managing treasury for the collective good, right? Among other things. But I think that's certainly a core value that they bring. And our laws are quite malleable and quite adaptable to all sorts of new structures that emerge in their own times that require some type of recognition and some type of formality in order for there to be appropriate safeguards in place and incentives to participate. People sometimes forget, Robert, that the modern corporation did not come from biblical times. It's actually relatively new, depending on how you define it, no more than 100 or 200 years old in the law. Limited liability partnerships, same thing, didn't exist for ages, and now we take them for granted. So the law has always recognized new structures in order for organizations or groups of people to allocate responsibility, assign liability, and drive incentives. DAOs, I think, are just the latest in a long line in a proud history of that. And so I think we're going to be able to do this and do it well. And I think they are well suited for the particulars of crypto as much as any other structure.
I know your day-to-day is very often poring over a lot of regulation filings, but where do you go to stay up to date on what's happening in crypto and how the temperature is changing on, a particular trend versus another?
Yeah, well, I'm blessed that in my role as the chief legal officer here at Coinbase, I can literally open my front door or my virtual door, and the flood of issues and opportunities come rushing in. But I do try to lift myself out of my particular bubble and try to expose myself to different ideas. X and Twitter certainly gave me that opportunity. Discord channels, subreddits, all of that are important. Podcasts are also, I think, an important way to be exposed to different ideas. But here's the thing that's maybe a little less conventional that I try to do, Robert, as often as I can, because I do think it's important to to press and challenge your own assumptions from time to time. I try to go out and read the harshest, most scathing assessments of crypto put out by the academics, by certain policymakers. I try to expose myself to speeches from those who would just as soon see crypto disappear from the face of the earth as much as anything else when I can, because I think that unless you do that, unless we all do that, at least from time to time, it can be very easy to believe that things that you and I and others take for granted are understood and embraced by the masses. And the reality is that for all the growth we've seen in crypto over the last decade or more, it's still only touching a tiny percentage of the people on this planet, and we want to change that. I think that's the right way to go about it.
It surprises people when I tell them that about a third of the people that matriculate through our blockchain certificate programs are professional athletes that have been in the Super Bowl, actors, people that understand how digital assets can help them grow their following, weave into their existing following. And a great many lawyers that are coming out of UCLA Law see the value in being of service to these clients or their family offices. What would you tell newly minted lawyers that are interested in representing crypto companies or industries that are as fast moving as this in terms of how to be helpful for the principals?
Well, I'm not surprised at all, frankly, that UCLA would be such a hotbed of interest in crypto and what these technologies can do in a whole variety of industries. Because, I mean, so many creative people are naturally drawn to UCLA that I think they instinctively understand that any technology that offers the promise of a more equitable split of ownership over intellectual property and creative rights is worth exploring. I think any community like that is naturally going to be drawn to the idea that the 70-30 or even 100% zero split or take rates that are common in Web 2 don't have to be that way, and that we can have a different system if we just embrace new solutions like those that are offered by NFTs and self-hosted wallets and all the technologies of Web 3. It's worth exploring that. To answer your question about what can new lawyers do to help that community engage with these opportunities and understand what the risks are, but also where there may be real promise. I think first and foremost, it's just critical to use these technologies. I can't tell you how many times I meet an otherwise incredibly promising, talented young lawyer, and after they spend 20 minutes laying out for me all the things that excite them about crypto, I ask them, so what wallet do you use? Of course, I'm hoping that they answer Coinbase, but that's okay if they want to use another wallet. We have lots of friends in this industry. And they have a blank stare on their face. And they say, well, I've never actually thought to use this stuff. So I think it's critical to get your hands dirty and get a little bit of dirt under the fingernails when it comes to crypto, just to understand it, and also to develop a confidence that the arguments you may be making under the 1933 Securities Act actually make sense in the real world, or your concerns about the ways in which FinCEN and the Department of Treasury may be applying certain sanctions rules to certain crypto mixers are grounded in actual experience trying to send money to someone either here in the United States or overseas without having the government prying into every facet of the transaction. If you have some real world experience using these technologies, I just think you're not only more credible in advising others like those at UCLA that want to learn more, but you're going to be much more effective. And so I advise that often, and I try to follow that advice myself as often as I can.
We've had several questions from past experts. One in particular, I would wonder if Sina would ask on behalf of Pat Doherty, who was a former SEC lawyer, had said many complimentary things about you that I think that we'd love to get your perspective on.
Thanks, Robert, and thank you, Paul. This is so interesting and informative, so thanks for being with us. So yeah, the question is on the disclosure side, and the question from Pat is, Coinbase asked the SEC to adopt disclosure rules for crypto assets and cash market transactions, but the SEC declined to act on that request. The FIT21 Act would create a disclosure regimen, but it's not yet been adopted. That being said, what can the private sector do to improve disclosure in the absence of SEC and definitive congressional action on this topic?
I love this. I love this question, and I'm grateful Pat suggested it. Look, we did file back in July of 2022 a formal petition for rules with the SEC in order to get specific guidance on all of the different disclosures that issuers could and should and must make in order to properly inform purchasers of tokens or others who are interested in token projects. As you point out, Sina, that request was at first ignored for many months, indeed several years. And then ultimately, after we went to court to force an answer from the SEC came back with a polite but firm no to our request. And we are now litigating that issue again, this time on the merits in the Third Circuit. And I think we're going to ultimately prevail on that. Yes, there's legislation in the form of FIT21, which is a bill that would provide definitive rules for market structure for the very first time and standards for issuer disclosures that don't exist currently in the federal securities laws. And I would love to see FIT21 passed, because right now Europe and so many other parts of the world are, as I said, racing ahead to put their own mark on this. And I think it's critical that the US be part of that conversation before it's over. In the meantime, there's a lot I think that cryptocurrency projects and lawyers advising those projects could and really should do. And I would encourage, for example, project founders and those advising them to consider that it's not just enough for us to sit on the sidelines and say, give us rules or give us a new law, and then in the meantime, do nothing and continue to leave. In some cases, at least, token purchasers or those interested unclear about things like the tokenomics of the project, on things like whether or not there will be a hard cap on the number of tokens issued, on things like what are the governance rules and what rights do come with the token that allow participation in the project and not mere passive involvement. I think there could and should be disclosures in the meantime regarding the security of the network and all of the reasons why a token purchaser should have confidence that there won't be rug pulls or hacks or other things to undermine their confidence. So there's a long list of things that I think the industry and individual project developers could do and really should do in the meantime. And I think it's actually quite important that we hold ourselves accountable in that way, if for no other reason than to preserve our credibility and to show the world that this can be done. This isn't rocket science, and that the SEC and Congress's failure to act here really is motivated by all kinds of reasons other than it's just too hard or no one could actually pull this off. We know that's not true.
And then one more from Avichal Garg of Electric, who asks, assuming regulatory acceptance, what does success look like 10 years down the road for crypto?
Avichal always asks the higher order questions, so I'm glad he offered this one because it's something he and I talk a lot about. Look, in my mind, success in 10 years is where two things happen. One, cryptocurrency lawyers like myself are the least interesting people in crypto. We toil away quietly in the background because all the important regulatory issues and legal issues have been resolved. Maybe that's a pipe dream. Maybe that's just me aspiring to a quieter life. But that is certainly an important part of the vision that I have. I think more seriously, what that world looks like above all things is a world where we don't even really talk about crypto per se, where blockchains and protocols aren't even sort of part of the understanding or necessary understanding of anyone who wants to get involved in these technologies. People just see cool apps and cool technologies working well. And when they no longer have to wait for a couple of days to settle a trade, or when they develop a really cool new piece of music or art and royalties flow to them, they don't even understand that that's because we've implemented blockchains and distributed ledgers to make all that possible. It just happens. So, look, we're going to get there. I mentioned my prior life extending back not just to Web 2, but Web 1 and Web 0. I remember in the early days of open source when we were having debates about protocols like TCP/IP and SMTP, we were always sort of like intensely discussing and debating like, how these protocols and technologies were going to lead to real world use cases. Well, nobody talks about those protocols today. You just send an email or you go check out a website or you download an app from the App Store. And they just work. And I think the future I'd like to see in 10 years, and maybe even less than 10 years, is one where we similarly don't think of these technologies as ends in and of themselves, but rather means to an end that we all want to see.
Amazing. Paul, I cannot thank you enough for breaking down all those answers, connecting with our past two blockchain experts of the quarter, and providing a lot of clarity as you have for many years for Coinbase. So thanks so much for stopping by and talking to us.
Pleasure is all mine, guys. Keep up the great work. And really, I'm just grateful for you all for spreading the word about what this technology can do for all kinds of people. So thank you.